1920s or so. He was a very simple man, not very well educated, a farmer, but he was the sexton, the caretaker, so to speak, of the little Catholic church in the village of St. Raimund. Very faithful Catholic. In 1938, as you know, the Nazis came to power in Germany. One of the first things they did was to pretty much annex Austria. Their armies moved into Austria, just took over Austria, made it part of the German Empire without barely a whimper from the Austrian people. And once they had done that, they required every able-bodied Austrian young man to join the army. Why? They were planning a war. They were going to conquer the rest of Europe. They wanted a huge army. They required every Austrian young man to join. Franz Jagerstatter refused to join the army. Why? Because he could not reconcile his faith in Jesus Christ with the Nazi doctrines. He couldn't reconcile being a Christian with socialist, National Socialism doctrines. The super race, looking down on other peoples, persecuting peoples, Jews and gypsies, and those. He couldn't reconcile that with his faith in Jesus. He refused to join the army. Now, he wasn't a pacifist. He would have fought for a just cause, but he did not believe in the cause of Nazism, so he wouldn't join. They put him in prison until he changed his mind. Now, lest you think he was some kind of religious fanatic, he wasn't. He was a married man. Some beautiful letters he wrote from prison to his wife, telling her how much she meant to him and how much their life together had meant to him. And three little daughters, too young to understand what was going on. They took a photograph of themselves and they were holding a sign. The sign said, "Dearest Papa, please come home soon." Sent him a picture. Some of his family and friends said, "Franz, just join the army. I mean, you don't have to believe what they believe. Just join." He couldn't compromise his faith. So one day, after a period of time, Nazis couldn't take it anymore. They were afraid his witness would spread. They brought him out into the main square of the city where he was in prison. They chopped his head off. He was a martyr for the faith. He had the wisdom to see things the way God saw them, even when many other people didn't. He had the courage to live by that, even at the cost of his own life. Franz Jagerstatter has been declared blessed by the church, the first step on the way to sainthood. In our lifetime, we might pray to St. Franz Jagerstatter, a witness to the faith. Wisdom and courage. Now, most of us here today are not probably going to have to die for our faith. I hope not, anyway. But I hope you know as you gather here today that Christianity is now the most persecuted religion in the world. In the Mideast, in the Far East, hundreds and thousands of Christians are in prison just because they're Christians. And many, many, many every year are killed just because they're Christians, followers of Jesus. Hopefully that won't be true of us. That doesn't mean that we don't need wisdom and courage. Let me give you two examples of what wisdom and courage might look like for us today. If I were to ask you young men and women today, why you have human dignity, where your human dignity comes from, where your human value comes from, I wonder what you'd answer me. Why do you have dignity? Why do you have value? People answer that question in lots of different ways. In our society, it's sometimes answered in a very destructive way. And that destructive way is illustrated by a study that was done a few years ago now by a woman's scholar, professor of women's studies at Cornell University. Joyce Joan Bromberg. She decided to do a study of the diaries of young women for the last 100 years. Young women about your age. So she went to libraries and she went to private collections and gathered all these diaries of young women for the last 100 years. She wrote a book detailing her findings. And one of the things she said was this: up until about 50 years ago, when you read the entries of young women's diaries, you'd be very likely to find something like this. Dear diary, I need to work harder in school. Dear diary, I need to be a better friend to Sally. Dear diary, I need to have more respect for my parents. Those kinds of things. And from that she concluded, that among other things, that up until about 50 years ago, young women judged their personal value, their personal dignity, by the good things that they did. If they were doing good things, they felt good about themselves. Well, 50 years ago, she said, she began to see a different kind of an entry coming in. Until it became very prevalent, and is very prevalent, she says, today. Today, more than not, these are the kinds of things you read in the diary of a young woman. Dear diary, I need to lose weight. Dear diary, I need a new hairdo. Dear diary, I need some new clothes. From this she concludes that for many, many young women today, they judge their human dignity and their human worth first and foremost by the way they look. By the way they look. If they don't look right, whatever that look is, if they don't look right, they don't feel good about themselves. How many young women do you know, hopefully not many, hopefully you're not one yourself, who are afflicted by that awful psychological disease of bulimia? They don't want to eat because they can't, they gotta look thin. Now, if that's where, and I'm not letting, by the way, I'm not letting you go in off the hook here, okay? Do you ever see those television commercials for Under Armour athletic wear? Do you ever notice the models who model that Under Armour stuff? They got washboard abs, huh? Not too many of us have washboard abs. A few of us do. Not many of us. But why is it that so many young men go to the gym, train? Want to look good and they put on those shirts. You have those, those pants that hang way down. That'll look good. So it's not just young women, it's young men too. Don't feel good about ourselves unless we have the look. I got bad news for all of us. There are only a very few of us here and in the world who qualify as hunks or babes. Just a few of us. Just a few. And I've got bad news for all of us, including them. Including the hunks and babes among us. You know why? Because someday, even if you're a hunk or a babe, it'll be true for every one of us. You'll get up one morning, no matter how much you trained and how many nips and tucks you've had over the years, through that plastic surgery. I was watching the Academy Awards the other night. Saw some of those older stars, older Hollywood stars. But isn't that sad? But here's the bad news, even for people like that, for the hunks and babes of the world, for all of us. Someday you're going to get up, walk into your bathroom, look into your full-length mirror, because all hunks and babes have full-length mirrors, right? You're going to go, oh my God. Because overnight, it seems, everything will have fallen. Everything will have fallen. Even for hunks and babes, there's a sad reality. Gravity wins. But here's the point. If your value and your dignity came from the way you looked, what happens then? What happens when gravity wins? And when the facelifts make you look like the Joker? Have you lost your value? Lost your dignity? Unfortunately, that's what many people in our society live like it's true. But if you've got the wisdom of God, you understand that's not at all true. Where does our dignity come from? Where does our value come from? From one thing, that every single one of us is a beloved son or daughter of the Father. Every one of us was created and put into this world by God the Father because He loved what He saw about our possibilities, our human possibilities. And you know from science alone that there is no person that's like any other person ever. Isn't that marvelous? God would create every one of us totally distinct. That's where our dignity comes from. And we can never lose that. You can never lose it. I hope you'll have the wisdom to understand that. And the courage to live that way. Not to spend so much time worrying about things that are secondary. And treat yourself gently and treat other people gently. Because you know who you are. Where your dignity comes from. Second example. Suppose I were to ask you today how you'll know when you are a success in this world. If you're a success. When you're a success. How do you know that? How does our society answer that question often? Money. Your success depending on the number of zeros you have in your bank account. That's when you know you're a success. By society standards, sometimes. You know, boy, if I had enough money so that I could buy a Porsche Carrera, I could whip down the main street of Concord here in my Porsche when the weather's good with the top down, you know, with my little jaunty scarf on, wave to the crowds as they went by. Boy, look at that guy, he's got it made, huh? Oh, boy. Or, if I had a house, a home, that made the cover of Home Beautiful, boy, oh, maybe in my house, my Home Beautiful house, I had a walk-in bathroom that was tiled with imported Italian marble. Who's got that? Only successful people. Imported Italian marble. When I had dinner parties, I could give guided tours of my bathroom. Show everybody my imported Italian marble. Boy, I thought it made a big success. Well, nothing wrong with having a lot of zeros in your bank account. If you do, I hope you'll not forget the poor. St. Francis always is, Pope Francis is always encouraging us to not forget the poor. But is that what makes you a success? When you stand before God in heaven, that's what we're all going to do. And God says to you, what did you make of your life? You say, well, God, look at my Porsche. Here's my Porsche, look at this. What? I was a big success down there, look at the Porsche. What's God going to do with that? Suppose you say to God, here's a photograph of my walk-in bathroom. Look at that imported Italian marble. Everybody envied. I was a big success down there. What's God going to do with that? What does the wisdom of God tell us about success? Jesus says to us, the greatest one among you, the most successful one among you, in other words, the greatest one among you will be the one who loves the most. That's the measure of our success in God's eyes. Whether we're able to give of ourselves to other people and for other people. And anybody can do that, no matter how many zeros they have. Remember St. Mother Teresa of Calcutta? Wonderful story told about her one day she's giving a tour to some people of her facilities there, and they're standing on this busy intersection waiting to go across the street. And all of a sudden she looks down the street and she begins running down the street. She's 4 feet 11 tall, by the way, okay? With her religious robes on, running down the street. And where's she going? They follow her. All of a sudden they realize where she's going. She's seen an old man lying in the gutter. Lying there. Filthy. Dying. How many people that morning on their way to work, carrying their briefcases in their fancy cars, had gone right by that man and never seen him? Oh no, that's not right. They saw him. They didn't want to see him. She saw him, picked him up, brought him to one of her homes where he died within a couple of days. Who's the success in the eyes of God? Who do you and I want to be like when we stand before God? So my dear young men and women, I hope that you will understand with the grace of the Holy Spirit that you'll have the wisdom to see things the way God sees them and the courage to live that way. Because it's then that you're going to find joy. It's then that you're going to find joy, I'll assure you of that. That's when you'll find joy. You're not going to find it any other way. You may be distracted. You may find temporary little delights, but you won't find joy unless you see things the way God sees them and have the courage to live that way. Let me conclude with one final little story. You might have heard it before, but I think it's, to be honest, a powerful story. It's told about these 3 men who worked in a big high-rise building in the city. And on Friday afternoon, they lived out in the suburbs. On Friday afternoon, they would make their way to the train station to take the commuter train out to the suburbs. Now, if you've ever been in a big city train station on a Friday afternoon, you know what it's like. Pandemonium. It's like being in the mall the day before Christmas. You can't find a parking place, people shoving, just everybody trying to get out of the city. So these guys are running through the station because they've only got 5 minutes to get to their track. They have to wait 2 hours for the next train. So they're running through the crowd. Of course, you're inadvertently bumping into people. And as they're doing this, they bump into this apple cart. There's a young woman there selling apples, and they hit the apple cart. Apples go all over the floor. So they look, but they can't stop. They've got to get to that track. Finally, one of them looks around, and he sees this young woman down on her hands and knees. He stops, and he says, and they say, come to him, come on, you better miss the train. Yeah, I'll get the next one. He goes back. Gets down to help her pick up the apples. Many of them are crushed now, all in. And he looks and she's picking up the apples. He realizes something about her. She's blind. She's blind. That's why she's selling apples in the train station. So he helps her put up the cart. Put the good apples that are left there. And before he leaves, he takes out some money and he gives it to her. And he says, I'm sorry this happened, and I hope this will make up for your losses. He turns around to walk away, very slowly now because he's got like 2 hours to wait, right? And as he walks away from this young woman, he hears her say something. You know what she says? Mister, are you Jesus? Mister, are you Jesus? We're going to have people ask questions about us too. They're wondering why we do what we do, who we are, why we live that way. And of course, if they were to ask us, are you Jesus? We'd say, of course not. What we could say is this, but I am his disciple. And I am committed to bringing about in this world, by his love, his kingdom. I am his disciple. For me, and I hope you can all say this with great dedication and belief today and every day of your life. For me, Jesus Christ is Lord. For me, Jesus Christ is Lord. May God bless you.